All right, I got my guy, Brandon Joe Williams, on the show today. He's the founder of the National Amnesty Coalition and founder of Williams and Williams Law. Brandon, welcome to the show, brother.
Hello, hello.
Dude, we are going to rock the mic today and flip, I think, the paradigm of what people think reality is on its head. We're going to talk about a lot of things, how taxes aren't real, how the United States government is really a corporation, and that's why they're allowed to tax you. And man, there's so much more. I can't wait. I can't wait to get into this. How you can actually discharge credit card debt, and how people are able to do that. There's a lot of other guys out there that talk about this. I don't know if they're true. I think there's like that guy I saw on Luke Story's podcast, Brother Truth. He claims he's buying cars left and right. I don't know if he's talking the truth, but what I do know is I've been going through this process over the last year, and since then I've started to learn from others like you and Brother Truth and others that are actually talking about this regularly, and somehow you're not getting censored on YouTube. Congratulations. But you're teaching how you can actually do this and get out of the system. I'm curious for you though, so my story I told you was, I got fired over the mandates 3 years ago. I knew Big Pharma were criminals already, so that was obvious to me. I knew the money system was corrupt. I started learning about Bitcoin and the fiat system. I had no idea about the government. I had no idea about the Federal Reserve and how all these things historically took place, the 14th Amendment, things that we'll talk about today. But my eyes were open because so many other things had happened to me prior in my life. I'm curious for you, how were your eyes open and you said, holy shit, I think there's something here. This isn't a conspiracy theory. And you went down the rabbit hole and now you're doing what you're doing. You are immersed in that world, teaching others.
Yeah. It's a crazy world. I mean, the 14th Amendment is what created the U.S. citizen category. And Congress said right in 1967 during the congressional record, I have the evidence for that on both my Nation of the Amnesty Coalition website, the amnestycoalition.org, as well as my Williams and Williams Law Firm.com website. I have the cover sheet that shows the time periods and the dates and everything. And then I have the exact page where they're talking about how the 14th Amendment was never legally ratified by 2/3 of the states and isn't even legally there. It doesn't even really legally exist at all. So the U.S. citizen category that everyone believes that they are doesn't actually physically exist in real life or even in law at all. It's actually just what happened is during the reconstruction of the government at the end of the Civil War, there was a lot of craziness happening, and the original unincorporated government was replaced by a corporate version of the government in 1871. And then you had the 14th Amendment, and then you had what's called the slaughterhouse cases, which is a federal Supreme Court cases that really talked and clarified more about how the citizenship had been split into two different categories. And the 14th Amendment birthed the U.S. citizen category, but the slaughterhouse cases is what really solidified it. And we've had these two different categories ever since. And here we are 153 years later, and people have completely forgotten about the other one, which is in 1871 it was called state citizenship, and now you just simply don't even see it. It's been slowly whittled away into non-existence, and now everyone believes that there's only one category, the U.S. citizenship category, which is completely untrue. In fact, there is no U.S. citizenship category. That category does not legally exist. It is a complete delusion. And everyone is operating off of a delusion, according to Congress from the congressional record in 1967.
Okay, on that note, because anybody that's listening to this, I'm sure like me, they're like, okay, I kind of believe what you're saying, but come on, Brandon, how could a government continue this lie? Why would we be living this lie for this long? If you have the evidence, which I believe you do, and like the actual court records and everything didn't pass, then how did we get here? And that no one has rose their hand and said, hey, no, 1967. Like, why would we keep doing this if we knew back then that the 14th Amendment was a joke? Now, I know only from what I know now, and I've seen it since 2019. I watched censorship. I watched them burn the books, if you will. I don't know what it was like back then. Maybe you know better than I do, but I'm just curious from your opinion and all your studies. Yeah, what do you think? Why are we not aware of this? You'd think this would be like people, there'd be outrage.
Well, let's start with showing what I was speaking about earlier and seeing what Congress actually says. Can you see the screen here?
Yeah.
So we have here, this is the Congressional Record, volume 113, part 12. This is from June 12th, 1967 through June 20th, 1967. Pages 15309 through 16358, I believe it is. And this was scanned into whatever computer system on 6th of December, 1968, it looks like. United States
Brandon,
government.
do you have to go to the U.S. What do they call it? Like a records department in Washington D.C. to get these, or are you able to find these online? Because I know some of these you can't even exist unless you go to D.C. itself and request the records.
No, you can go online for a lot of stuff, and you can also go to law libraries and get all sorts of good stuff. I went to the law library recently to get the original unincorporated Constitution for California before the incorporated version of California was created in 1871.
Okay,
there's two different constitutions. There's two different countries. There's two different states, and there's two different constitutions. The unincorporated California, the Constitution is from 1849. It's actually still active even to this day. It's never been repealed. Whereas the Constitution for the incorporated version, the business version of California, was created in 1979. Right? Two entirely different countries, two entirely different constitutions. Okay. So real quick, let's get back into this. So this is the congressional record from 1967. It says here, and this is from June 13th, 1967 on page 15641. The 14th Amendment - equal protection law or tool of usurpation. So they're speaking about how, is this thing a protection law, or is it actually like a tool of taking over the whole country or something from some foreign land or whatever, right? And you have here, it's a little bit hard to read. I wish I could somehow, let's see what this does. Here we go, perfect. We have... whereas the Reconstruction Acts of Congress unlawfully overthrew their existing governments, removed their lawfully constituted legislatures by military force, and replaced them with rump legislatures, which carried out military orders and pretended to ratify the 14th Amendment. Our own Congress is saying this in 1967, by the way. And then we have the next section here.
Why do you think you're a historian? Why do you think they allowed this? I mean, at the time,
there was just so much going on and just so much chaos and so much insanity that somehow it just got slipped under the radar. I mean, the whole government basically went under, and there was a whole secondary government that was created during this time period. Through the Organic Act of 1871, right? And then this is also when just before this is when the word person was redefined to include artificial groups, artificial corporations and trusts and estates. And then this time period is also when the public school system was born. The public school system was born in the same Organic Act as when the incorporated government was born. The public school system and the incorporated government were in the same act, or in the same law, the same section of law. Like the Organic Act of 1871 birthed the incorporated government as well as the public school system at the same time. Those two things are married together, right? So
shocking.
Here's the next thing. The 14th Amendment is unconstitutional. The purported 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution is and should be held to be ineffective, invalid, null, void, and unconstitutional for the following reasons. 1, 2, and then 3. The proposed 14th Amendment was rejected by more than 1/4 of all the states then in the Union, and it was never ratified by 3/4 of all the states in the Union.
Wow.
Straight from Congress, right?
Wow.
So the 14th Amendment only exists because we all are operating on the idea that it does. It doesn't actually exist.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, it's funny because this gets touted a lot with illegal immigration and like, oh, thank God for the 14th Amendment. Like people now get to become citizens. Like it's this beautiful thing. And it's really just a trap.
Yeah, before the 14th Amendment, there was just we the people, and there was no such thing really as state citizenship, U.S. citizenship. I'm not even sure the word, it was just maybe just the word citizen by itself, and it had a completely different meaning. After the 14th Amendment, citizen means government employee. Prior to the 14th Amendment, citizen just meant like an inhabitant, basically.
Yeah.
Completely different definition, right?
Yeah.
So the word citizen really has become this whole slave nightmare mechanism, and it was born out of something that doesn't even exist in law. The 14th.
Yeah. Wow. How, Brandon, before we go further, how did you get involved in this? What was your aha moment, or did something just like feel wrong for you, or you're like, I don't know, like, and then you started learning more? Like, what was your moment, like mine, where you just realized there's something that doesn't make sense here, and then the more you kept digging, you're like, this doesn't add up. This doesn't add up. That's kind of what it was for me. Was there a moment for you that happened?
Yeah, I had the employment development department in California chasing after a company that I had just taken over, a landscaping company, and they decided to trespass onto one of my clients' properties and start interrogating my staff, and then send me a large, like $60,000 or $65,000 bill for God knows what. And that's basically what started everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Walk us through, because we just jumped in and started talking about the 14th Amendment, but you mentioned some key dates here, and one of them is 1871. And from my understanding, and you can help me fill in the gaps, from my understanding, the United States after the Civil War was bankrupt and they needed money. And so from my understanding, they basically made a deal with Britain saying, we need money. And Britain said, sure, we'll give you money, but this is what you got to do. And then we saw this act come into play, the United States. And that is essentially where I think Washington, D.C. was born, and the United States became a corporation. It became an entity. And then we, the employees of the corporation, became essentially employees of this corporation, and then that led to taxation, their ability to, essentially make us like servants to this corporation. Am I getting some of that right, or maybe can you kind of walk us back to where this all started from?
Yeah, so the whole point was, at the end of the Civil War, what was going on was they were releasing all of the, and I can do another screen share. They were releasing all of the slaves out of slavery, and there was still a lot of people that didn't really want that to happen. So what they did was they created and you can see it right here, because I know for a lot of people, they don't believe that any of this is real, but you can see literally just
and you're using Google, by the way, which is,
right on. I don't even go, dude. I use Google for most things. I mean, when you really nail something, from my experience, when you really nail something, you can find it right on Google. But you have to really, really nail it before you'll be able to get something like that, right?
Yeah.
So you type in slaughterhouse cases, right? And the slaughterhouse cases was a landmark U.S. Supreme Court decision which ruled that the privileges or immunities clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution only protects the legal rights that are associated with federal U.S. citizenship, comma, not those that pertain to state citizenship, right? So we have two entirely different citizenship categories, right? And another area where we can just prove that very, very rapidly, I can get into my whole typical presentation where I break down the difference between nationality and citizenship, but just to violently smash through any speculation people may have, 8 U.S.C. 1401 and 18 U.S.C. 1408. 18 U.S.C. 1401 describes the following shall be nationals and citizens of the United States at birth. 8 U.S.C. 1408 describes the following shall be nationals but not citizens of the United States at birth. So the reason why I use these two is to bring to the forefront the fact that there are two very, very different things at play here. If you go to the United States Code and you look at Title 8, people usually believe it has to do with citizenship. Title 8, if you look at the name of it, Aliens and Nationality, and then you click on it and you don't see the word citizen anywhere. Here's all the different chapters in Title 8. Alien registration, miscellaneous provisions, immigration, alien ownership of land, freed men, civil rights, elective franchise, general provisions, but you don't see the word citizen anywhere. You'd have to probably dig much deeper into this to find anything about that particular subject. The larger overreaching subject is actually nationality, not citizenship. They're totally separated. So that's really where this whole rabbit hole kind of begins. And the thing is that the slaughterhouse cases is what created this situation, right? You can see here, there's two different types of categories. There's the federal U.S. citizenship category, and then there's state citizenship. State citizenship over the years, over 153 years, became under the nationality subject. So state citizenship would be a nationality, whereas federal U.S. citizenship would be U.S. citizen.
Right. That's like where I would be. I was born and raised in California, so I would be like a Californian or something, I believe.
Precisely. Californian.
Yeah. Yep. You wouldn't say I'm a U.S. citizen. You would say I'm a Californian, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So you have things like every once in a while you'll hear stories about the passport office sending, telling people that they're 14th Amendment citizens. Well, the thing is they aren't, because the thing is that the 14th Amendment was never legally ratified. Now, I've never seen anyone sue the Department of State for this, but I think that's where we're going to start heading with a lot of this. I'm probably going to sue the Department of State myself just for fun, literally. Because the thing is that this has to get sorted out. And the thing is that once the 14th Amendment, you have to realize the 14th Amendment birthed the Federal Reserve notes, paper fiat banking, negotiable instruments being passed as currency, such as what we have now. Federal Reserve notes are promissory notes. They are not money by definition. You have the creation of the CDC, the creation of the CIA, the creation of the FBI, even the creation of the police, the creation of the public school system, the creation of the Social Security system, the creation of literally almost everything you see every single day and everything you see in the media. The only thing that wasn't created by all of this was the county recorder and the sheriff's office. So if the 14th Amendment was found to be whatever Congress said, whatever, and be held to be invalid, null, all the things that Congress was saying, what would happen is the police would cease to exist, the Federal Reserve would cease to exist, the corporation called United States would cease to exist, the District of Columbia would cease to exist, the public school system would cease to exist, the FBI, the CIA, the IRS, the ATF, and the police would cease to exist instantly. And we would go back onto gold and silver coins. We would have the local county recorder, and we would have unincorporated courts. So all the corporated courts that are currently active would all be instantly liquidated, and everything would convert back to what you saw before, like 1860. So it'd be more common law and equity courts. And we would reboot the entire country back to probably around 1850 in terms of the technology available. And then what would happen is the county recorders would be obviously digitized. So what would happen is that you would have local courts, you would have a digitized county recorder's office, and things like UCC1 financing statements and liens and all this stuff, it would all go away. But it would all go back to how liens worked back before the government was incorporated. And it would probably all work through the county recorder's office. And then the county recorder's office would be, I'm just making this up in my head, would be sort of merged with the court system. And everything would be sort of like Pacer, like what we have now for when we log into our litigation and we litigate, we can file everything into the dockets using Pacer. It would probably be some kind of an online system where it would be, like the county recorder and the courts kind of married together, and you would file into the county recorder, and then that would get fed into the courts, and then the courts would put together the juries to figure out, who owns what or whatever. But the amount of claims would go way down because all statutes would be wiped off the face of the earth. So really all that'd be left is like tort claims, like fraud, stealing money, you smashed into my car, you broke a contract, like real simple, almost like morality based charges. That's pretty much all you'd see. And then the only way there'd be any criminal cases on anyone is there'd have to be a victim, and the victim would have to be a live man or woman. It couldn't be the state like what we have now, and they would have to want to and actually press charges. So it's like I run into your car and we talk, and I say, listen, don't worry, I'll pay for it. Let's not get all that involved. And they have to decide now, do they want to press charges or not? Or they can press charges later. If they never press charges, there is no criminal case. There has to be a victim, and there has to be charges pressed by that victim. And then that victim has to write an affidavit as to what happened. And then there has to be an indictment based off that affidavit. And that's the way that the process would work. And if the 14th Amendment is held to be null, invalid, or the other terms that were being used by Congress in 1967, that is the world we would be going back to. And inflation would be wiped off the face of the earth. The public school system would be wiped off the face of the earth. Social justice would be wiped off the face of the earth. Federal Reserve would be wiped off the face of the earth. All police, all traffic, anything. There'd be no traffic cops. If you saw sheriffs driving around, there would be. If you saw sheriffs driving around, they wouldn't be pulling anybody over. They're just trying to get from one place to another. They're just moving around just like everybody else. There is no patrolling. That would no longer exist because in the sheriff's office, you don't have that situation.
Yeah.
Unless there's a criminal act. For example, someone's drunk and smashing into cars or causing accidents. At that point, the lights would turn on because there's an emergency situation. That person would be pulled over, and they would be forced to correct any damage that they have committed. If they committed $10,000 of damage to this, $10,000 in damage to this, and $10,000 in damage to local public streets, they would probably be responsible for cleaning all that up, fixing the wall. You could go over there with a bunch of concrete and fix it yourself, or you could paint the car yourself, or you could fix the car, but you would be responsible for making whatever damage that you were specifically and explicitly responsible for to have that corrected. And that would be the system that we'd be living in.
Yeah. I love that. And my story being a former police officer, I think it's great. I absolutely love that idea. And it really, having moved from California to Idaho, for the most part in Idaho, the vibe I get is like, just be a good person. And if you're not, like, we'll beat you up. It's just like, just be a good person. And everyone has kind of like a mutual understanding of that. And you'll see on people's lawns, like if I'm not talking about not like a lawn in a suburban division. I'm talking about like in the country, you'll see it'll say like no trespassing, I will shoot you. And it's just very like common sense stuff, right? We're going back to common sense, common courtesy, which I love. So I'm in total agreement with you. You mentioned common law. Oh, go ahead.
Well, that's great. Because the thing is that what happened, there's a sort of a progression that occurred, right, too. So common law was known to be quite vicious. You'd pissed off some people in the town, and the town would hang you for things, or rip your arms off, or all sorts of ungodly things, because there was no statutes. There was no, this is what happens when this occurs. It's just whatever the locals decide is what's going to happen, right? So when you hear the term equity, so equity is a type of court that was opened to try to mitigate the violence of a common law court, right? So what happened was at some point in time, they were trying to mellow out the violence associated with common law, and the intensity by which the common law would be meted out. Like, for example, in today's world, there's a lot of people complaining, especially on the right, about how it's not strict enough and it's too easy and people get off too much and that kind of thing. You hear about a lot of that. Back then in the common law world, it was the opposite. Okay. You pissed off some people and you had your entrails ripped out in public in front of the whole town. It's sort of like, I hate to say it, but I will say it. It's sort of like, I had an old buddy of mine who lived in Yemen, and he told me a story about what it's like in his country. And for some people, I'm going to tell the story. It's a very shocking story. And for some people, it may be very offensive. But in Yemen, they look at homosexuality as a disease, right? And what happens is if you are, and this is from a small village in Yemen, this isn't like the whole country. I'm not telling you it's the whole, I don't know about the whole country, but I know in the smaller villages, this is a firsthand experience that I was told by someone in New York City who was a close friend of mine. And if the family hides the homosexual person, then what happens is they're all guilty of basically harboring, essentially, like the way they look at it is like a disease. And what they do is they take the person and they take them up to the top of the mountain at the edge of town. They wrap their arms and legs, and they make the whole town watch, and they push them off the side of the mountain, and they roll down and they die on the way down. And it's horrible, right? And this is considered in their culture, in these smaller villages of Yemen, whatever village he's from, this is considered basically like a mental disease that needs to be removed from the society before it spreads like a disease does. So whether you agree with that or not, or whether you find that terribly, terribly offensive, it goes to show you that this is probably an excellent example of what common law was like in a lot of areas before you have equity and before you have the incorporated version of the government. So while I'm here talking about all these things, there is a flip side to all of this that needs to be understood and recognized, that when we go back to this, we may need to go back to maybe like more of an equity or something else, because if we go all the way back too far, we're liable to wind up in a Salem witch trial, a very vicious common law system where people start pointing fingers and then people are getting their eyeballs ripped out with ice cream scoopers. So there's two sides to everything.
Yeah.
You know, so it's something that needs to be very carefully, looked at and very thoughtfully designed. But if there was a very simple legal structure that was very, very easy to follow, and it was maybe only like a handful of pages, and it had a little definition section, and it was very simple, and all the definitions of the words were very clear, you could have a more mitigated common law system, but it would also mitigate the extreme speed and violence with which that system could come with. I think that's where I see this going, but we'll see. I have no idea,
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little about the common law, because I remember when I got fired in San Francisco over the mandates, there were common law court cases going on, and I wasn't too familiar with it at the time. And they made some very good arguments. Now, I was like, that sounds great. These common law cases, from my understanding, went nowhere. And I was thinking now, all that I've learned, I'm like, well, of course they didn't go anywhere, because guess what? My status, my identity was a United States citizen. And in a common law court, I'm assuming that would just immediately like make the case invalid, because I'm identifying as a citizen. Now, had I changed my status and did everything correctly, then maybe it would hold some weight. It's interesting now kind of learning some of these things, but maybe you could, you highlighted common law, what it is. What is then the law that most of us are, dealing with now that we could assume? And I know what we hear a lot is equity court, maritime law, admiral law. Maybe we can go in a little bit of the history there.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. It took me a long time to understand any of this. I think there's so much talking about all this and very little understanding, because it took me a long time to understand these things. You have common law. Equity came around because common law was too vicious. They were trying to chill out. And then as we went forward, we have the incorporated version of the government. And then now basically the way it works is, and I can go through the whole presentation if you'd like. It takes about 45 minutes. But the whole thing in a nutshell is basically now what we have is,
Brandon, if you think that's going to be the best and the more streamlined, I'm good with that.
It's typically the best, because if I try to get into it without breaking it all down,
without me
it's just
bouncing
not gonna...
around all these questions. Yeah, that's fine with me, man.
Sure, let's do it. So we'll start with, I always start with how to look up a law, which is very easy, very, very easy. You can just go, let me close out some of these, and you just type in, for this first one, we're going to go to 28 USC 3002. Okay.
Hey, Brandon, how do you look at the USC codes too versus like as an officer, I dealt with the penal code, right? And I never understood, like, as I've started to learn about this, I'm like, okay, but who's dealing with these US codes? I've never heard of these in my life as a cop, as a local law enforcement. And I'm assuming it's like state constitutional lawyers. I mean, I don't really know. I mean, who deals with these codes? There seem to be like, I don't know anybody that I don't ever hear these codes, used in like a regular day-to-day basis, which I also think is interesting because they're so difficult to find for the average person.
So there's state codes and there's federal codes. These are federal codes. USC is federal.
Okay.
So typically what you see states, and what they do is they try to be fun and cool, and they take the federal code and they might change it just a touch or change some of the words. But the federal codes are a good place to start, in my opinion. Plus, you also have state and federal courts. Like, for example, all the litigation I do is in federal court. So these, we don't go off the state statutes at all. If I were to bring up any of the penal code stuff that you're trained in federal court, they would say, get the fuck out of here with that. That has nothing to do with this courtroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the United States Code is what you're going to be dealing with in federal court. I like federal court more personally. It has a lot more resources. It's also quite a bit more expensive, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. Like a state case might be $280 and a federal case is $405. But in the grand scheme of it's going to take a year or two to get through it anyways. And if you lose, you get nothing. And if you win, it's massive. It doesn't really, I don't give a shit about $200. You know what I mean? So,
well, and to your point too, I understand from me going through this process, the straw man, and learning all about these laws, is you have to speak a certain way when you're speaking to judges, and you're not going to be, like you said, throwing out penal codes. They're going to be like, get the fuck out of here. None of this matters for your case. You're trying to, whether you're trying to discharge debt or do any of these things, you're not going to be, you have to speak a certain language. And so if you're not speaking a certain language, you're going to get kicked out right away. Your case is going to get screwed. So I'm assuming too, that is the court. When I've heard people talk about equity law or equity court, that's where you want to be, in federal court.
Yeah, there's a time and a place for state court, and there's a time and a place for federal court, and you can look at the various options that you will have for each. Each one has certain pros and cons depending on what you're trying to get done. And there's a special login system for each of the individual states for state court. And then there's Pacer. Another reason why I love federal court is because there's only one system. This system, public access to court electronic records, is for all federal cases in all 50 states as well as the District of Columbia. You don't need 7 different logins for 7 different states. You don't have to go and review state statutes for 7 different states. You study the federal codes, you understand the federal codes, and then you have a Pacer account. You're good to go in every state. So awesome. it's a way more stable courts. There's more resources. Typically, you get more judges looking at it. It's faster. There's less goofiness. It's more direct. There's a lot of benefits to being in federal rather than state court, in my opinion. But I do all my stuff in federal, but all my stuff is also only on one particular subject. If I was going to get into traffic violations, it'd be in state court. I'd be operating in state court all the time. But because I'm a negotiable instruments attorney, in fact, which means securities, essentially. I'm basically a securities attorney. Because securities and negotiable instruments operate exactly the same all over the country. There's literally almost no difference. For example, what is the UCC in each state? So what you have is the Uniform Commercial Code by state, and you can go through here and you can see that each state has either taken the entire Uniform Commercial Code, which is the federal body for negotiable instruments and other things in commerce, or they've kind of switched it around a little bit. Like, for example, in Texas, I know that one is a little different because we're dealing with that right now. Texas is the Business and Commerce Code, I believe. Yeah. So they've changed the code a little bit, but when you start to dig into the changes that have actually been made when it comes to a lot of this stuff, including traffic, including commerce, it's almost nothing. So the thing is that people get really caught up by like, oh my God, there's so much and each state's different and blah, blah, blah. That's why I like the federal stuff, because the federal stuff is pretty much what you're going to find everywhere. And it reduces the amount of confusion you're going to be experiencing. If you really believe that every single state's laws is like dramatically different, which most people do believe that, you're going to be very, very lost and confused. And when you realize that it's pretty much all based off of the federal, and if there are any adjustments, they're very minor, then it becomes a whole lot more simple. And all federal codes are very easy to access. They're more easy to access, in my opinion, than even the state stuff. So
very cool.
And when it comes to state versus federal, you have the FMSCA, right? So the FMSCA is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And if you look at, is the Department of Transportation the senior organization to the Department of Motor Vehicles? I don't know if I'll be able to find this in 10 seconds, but the answer is yes. So because the Department of Transportation is one of the 15 big boy departments, and then the Department of Motor Vehicles is a sub-department of the Department of Transportation. So what we're doing is, rather than getting state registration is through the Department of Motor Vehicles. We are actually going to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is on the federal level, and we're getting something called a private motor carrier number. So the way I call it, and the way I do all this is very different than most people, because I'm trying as hard as I can to interface with police in the least upsetting way possible for them. The private motor carrier is essentially the way that they define it is it transports its own cargo, usually as a part of a business that produces, uses, sells, and or buys that cargo, but that is being hauled. A private motor carrier transports its own goods and is required to have a U.S. DOT number, but does not need operating authority, right? So you can get one of these online for free, and then you literally just print up your own license plates with that number on there. And then when the police officer pulls you over, you don't have state registration. You have federal registration. Federal registration also allows you to register foreign trusts, foreign corporations. So you can actually get a private motor carrier DOT number using a foreign trust. So what that does is it makes it impossible for the police officer to establish residency.
I love this. This is so good.
And you know what that is. You know, you have to establish residency as a police officer. You know what I mean? So if you can't establish residency, what happens is everything the police officer knows and everything the police officer's ever been trained in flies into complete chaos. He has no idea what to do, right? And it's a beautiful situation. So
yeah.
And not that I'm trying to confuse cops. The whole point is we're all learning. But my point is that if you're not a resident, things become very interesting very rapidly. And I'm sure you can attest to that.
Well, yeah, 100%. And I will say, you know, having been on the other side, as I started to learn this stuff, I was like, oh my God, what a sham, all the stuff that I was doing. And I don't think, you know, I will say for my part, I was never maliciously going after, you know, I was never a traffic cop. I was always looking for bigger stuff and bigger criminals. So that was never my thing anyways. But still, there's a lot I look back at and I'm like, what a joke this is. It's all a facade. You know, and on this note, I think we should just highlight, I dealt with a lot of sovereign citizens in my career. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I didn't deal with a lot. I probably dealt with like 3 of them. There's a lot of typically violent ones out there. And what I've seen and what I've learned through this process is that sovereign citizen is an oxymoron. And actually, you can't be sovereign and be a citizen at the same time. What I've learned is that most of these guys are getting 50% of what they're saying is right, and the other 50% is wrong. They've never changed their status. And so when they give me their license on a napkin and they're like, this is my ID, I'm like, yeah, buddy, just give me your real ID. You can't do that. You're playing the wrong game. Had they fixed their status, their residency, and all these things you're saying, then They would be good, but they only know like part of the story.
Yeah, I just I've never gotten pulled over, amazingly, in years. And I drive an 800 horsepower straight piped 2009 Shelby GT500 and a straight piped 2023 Triumph Speed Triple 1200 RS. So it's pretty freaking hilarious. They both have diplomatic plates on them. But the thing is that, and I drive them way, way, way above the speed limit, like probably two times the speed limit on average. But the thing is that, if I got pulled over, we're going kind of off the beaten path here. But
yeah, we are. Sorry.
The way I handle getting pulled over is, I say I'm a foreign diplomat, and I don't qualify for state registration because I'm not a resident. You have to be a resident to get a driver's license. You have to be a resident to register your vehicle. You have to be a resident. I'm not a resident. So the thing is that I don't qualify for a driver's license. If I tried to get a driver's license, I would be going to prison. That's what I tell the officer.
Right.
It's a very different conversation than "fuck you, you pig, you can't touch me," blah, 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 which people forget. People think that cops are hot-headed when you go to anyone, man or woman of literally any age, and say, "Nana, nana, you can't get me," and push them and then run and see what happens. See what happens. What do you think is going to happen?
I would always tell Brandon, I always tell people, I say, listen, whether you believe it's right or wrong, I'm like, I'm unfortunately the person that holds more power in this situation. I'm like, you just be cooperate as best as you can. Cause like, that's all it is. Like, I want to get through this as fast as you do. Like, I want to make this easy. So yeah, I love that, dude.
So getting back onto this presentation, we have, the first number, whenever you're looking up a code or whatever, right, is the title number. So as we see here on the US code, we have all these different titles. The first one we're going to look at is Title 28, which is Judiciary and Judicial Procedure. Again, the United States Code is federal. So the body of law we're going to be looking at is the U.S. Code, Section 3002. Now, just to your point, let's say, for example, it was a traffic violation. We'll be looking at the California Vehicle Code, which would be here. And we could look at the various divisions of the California Vehicle Code. And you can even see here they're talking about federal codes in the state codes, motor carriers, right? Motor carrier, that's a federal term. So, for example, when you pull someone over and you say the word motor vehicle, that's a state term. At the federal level, they have a whole different term called motor carrier. And then there's two types of motor carrier. There's the private motor carrier, which is the one that we're getting, which is free and does not require any smog, any registration, anything. You don't even need insurance when you are cruising around in a vehicle that is a private motor carrier. And that's literally straight from the FMSCA. Does a private motor carrier need insurance? And you can see... we'll see if it comes up here. It should be pretty easy to find. Let's see. Private. Might take me more than a couple minutes to find that. Insurance requirements for a private motor carrier. Let's see. Last time I dug around on this, they didn't need it, but who knows? Maybe they changed that. But anyways, anyway, I would need to review it more. Maybe they've changed that, but last I checked, you didn't need it, and they said it right on in the FMSCA. There's like a question and answer section.
So if you get in an accident, though, how? I guess you just pay out of pocket then, right?
You just deal with it. However, yeah, it'd be like kind of a common law situation as well, where you could just make up the damage by it, whatever you guys figured out, basically, right?
Yep.
So going back to this, so 28 USC Section 3002 definitions. We're going to go down to subsection 15, definition A. United States means a federal corporation, right?
Boom, right there.
And what's important to know when it comes to a lot of these definitions, one of the most important definitions to learn, there's two words that are the most important words, in my opinion, in all of law and all of life. The first one is the definition of the word person, And the second one is a definition of the word naturalization, which we'll get into later. The definition of the word person. The term person shall be construed to mean and include an individual, a trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation. So the term person is very, very tricky, and it's a term that literally anytime you see it anywhere, even on the application for a driver's license, California, even this one says name of person who is, trying to get a. You'll start seeing this word everywhere, and you'll start seeing it in very strange ways as well. Now that you're aware of the word person, I can't get into this right now, but keep your eyes peeled for the term person. You'll start seeing it everywhere now. You'll even see inside elevators when they use the term person in plural, they say persons. They're referring to the legal definition because the plural of the word person in common law or outside of the statutory system is the word people, like we the people, right? So when you see persons, they're specifically and explicitly referring to include any legal fiction. Whereas when you see the word people, which you almost never see in law because they don't want that to be the term, they're referring to only men and women, right?
Wow.
So person is a really, really important term, right? So if United States is a federal corporation and a corporation is a person, that means that United States is a person. And you see that in all criminal cases, United States versus John Doe. That's why it's written that way, because United States is a person. That's how it works. Now, the next section is now that we know that United States is a federal corporation, and now that we know that a corporation is a person, now we want to find out where is that person located, right? Because everybody thinks they know where that person is located. So we're going to go to, so if you look on the Federal Reserve note, a Federal Reserve note is what's called a promissory note, which is an unconditional promise to pay between two parties. One party is the person called United States. The other party is a person called Federal Reserve. In UCC 9-307, what they're talking about in this particular section is they're talking about location of the debtor, which is the person called United States. So where is this debtor, this person called United States, located? We're going to go down to subsection H, and we're going to find out. Location of United States. It doesn't say the United States. It says United States because we're talking about a person here. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. So we have a person, we have a corporation. We've located this particular person. Now, the first question is, and I didn't have this question when I first saw this, but over the years looking at it over and over again, where in the District of Columbia? How large is it? What shape is it? Does it look like Texas? Does it look like Oklahoma? Does it look like California? Does it look like Florida? What is the shape, size, and location of this essentially state called United States, which is located in the District of Columbia? I've looked. I've never found that information. So I don't know where inside the District of Columbia or what size or what shape this state is, or this person called United States is. All I know is this state or person called United States is located only and exclusively in the 10-mile square radius called the District of Columbia.
What's interesting too, and I know you'll probably talk about this too, but in legal documents, this is one of the, like you said, you'll notice the word person now you're going to start noticing that. One of the big things I noticed was capital letters. And in legal documents, you see everything caps. And your license, it's caps. And your birth certificate, it's caps. It's a certificate. It's a bond. It's a legal document. But when you look back at some of these older documents, United States was lowercase. And so it's really interesting.
It's a nation of nations. So before the second version of the United States of America was born, which is called United States, once United States, the person, was born in 1871, all the states are just sub corporations of the mother corporation. So they're pretty much all the same thing. That's why the federal codes and the state codes are pretty much all the same. Prior to 1871, each individual state, for example, California or New Mexico, were actually completely separate countries. It's sort of like Europe. The United States of America and the European Union are the exact same thing. You have a bunch of different independent countries that are supposed to have their own independent currency, their own independent government, and their own independent laws. And then you have the European Union, which sort of like fused them all together, right? Mm-hmm. And the European Union is sort of like the federal level, and then the states are the state level, and the states is where all the power is, not the federal government. But in the statutory incorporated system, the federal government has all the power, and the states don't have that power. But they try to kind of like not show that off too much, because that's really hard evidence and hard proof that something goofy is going on, because people still know that the sheriff's office and the states and stuff are the ones that really are supposed to have the power. So when the FBI comes in and they try to muscle the state police officers or law enforcement or whatever, they typically like to keep that show under wraps, because they don't want people asking too many questions as to why does it appear as though the federal government has more power than the state government, because everything's been flipped in the incorporated system. In the unincorporated system, they're pretty much, I don't even think there really was a federal government. I mean, if there was, it was like the good old boys, like Ben Franklin and all these guys. There wasn't really like much of an actual operation there. It was pretty much just all stateside, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, we're going to go to 42 USC 9102, subsection 18. And we're going to find out what is a United States citizen, right? And the first thing we're going to notice, which is always very fascinating, is if you look at subsection C. So again, a person is defined as, an estate, a trust, a partnership, a corporation, association. So any corporation, partnership, association, or other entity organized or existing under the laws of the United States is in itself as a person considered a United States citizen. You don't see this a lot. And the reason why is because it tips the hand way too much and gets people asking way too many fucking questions. If you have a corporation, Starbucks Incorporated is actually legally a U.S. citizen. 76 gas station is a U.S. citizen. Tesla Incorporated is a U.S. citizen, which is pretty shocking for most people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you start getting into definition A, any individual who is a citizen of the United States by law, birth, or naturalization, right? So law means like contracted into and operating under the laws of. Birth, so this is where you start getting into why the Department of State says that you're a 14th Amendment citizen, because your mom signed the birth certificate. The birth certificate says that you were born in state of Nevada. They're talking about state of Nevada, the corporation located in the District of Columbia, which is a subcorporation of the corporation called the United States. Your mom didn't know it, but she essentially naturalized you into the District of Columbia by signing the birth certificate, which we're going to get into in just a moment.
Yeah.
And then we have the most important term, in my opinion, probably and literally all of law, besides maybe the word person, is the word naturalization. And I honestly think you can pretty much just remove these two. I mean, literally, when we start getting into naturalization, you'll see it's the most insane thing you've ever seen in your whole life. And when I first learned the definition of the term naturalization, I was walking around in complete disbelief, as if I had been transported to an alternate universe for about 60 entire days. That's how crazy it was, right? The definition of naturalization comes from 8 USC 1101 subsection A 23. And it's going to rip your skull clean off your body, just like it does with everybody. Most people can't even believe it. And they walk around for God knows how long, questioning their whole existence and questioning everything. It is like being torn out of the Matrix and placed in the Nebuchadnezzar in literally split seconds, right? The term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever. I'm going to read it a couple more times because it's so fucking mind-blowing that most people, and then we're going to go through every single word of the definition and break down everything. This one word and this one definition, when we finish breaking it down, will give you more power and more ability and more freedom than anything you've ever experienced in your entire lifetimes 150,000. Okay? Let's read it again. The term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever. Now, so far in this presentation, there's one word here that you already know you should have your eye on: person. Now, luckily, the word person here is clickable. Now, we're in Title 8 on this one, so let's see if there's any little differences in the definitions here. We're going to click on person. You'll see that's a lot more vague than the other one we found. The other one that we found is my favorite one. That comes from the tax code, Title 26. This is the Title 8 definition of the word person. The term person means an individual or an organization. Much more simple, much more vague. And if you go down, there's even a special definition for the word organization, which I believe is subsection A28. Just pull that up real quick. Let's see, 28, right here. The term organization means, but is not limited to, which is very fascinating, an organization, corporation, company, partnership, association, trust, foundation, or fund, and includes a group of persons, whether or not incorporated, permanently or temporarily associated together with joint action on any subject or subjects. So the word organization, it includes incorporated and unincorporated, plus it is not limited to this definition. So literally, I'm not kidding when I say this, organization means literally anything and everything, regardless of if you so much as even say that you and your buddy are now a group and you guys are going to go on Call of Duty and you have a clan on Call of Duty. That clan on Call of Duty is legally, as per the definition from Title 8, an organization, and it would fit under the term person. Everything would fit under the term person in Title 8. It's not that way in a lot of other sections of law. But in Title 8, I mean, everything is a person. I mean, there's just like, I couldn't even imagine there being something that wouldn't be able to fall under the definition of the word person. A foreign trust would be a person. Literally, people who live in the forest, who chop wood together, that no one even knows is there, could be classified under the definition of organization, which could then be classified under the definition of person, right? So that the reason why I'm saying that is because you're going to see how powerful this term is and how powerful this process, I guess you could call it a process, is, right? Now, this word state, a lot of times you see it capitalized. It's not capitalized here in Title 8. There's a reason for that. The capitalized S, state, is referring to one of the 50 corporations, the corporate versions of the state, right? When it's lowercase s, it's not referring to the corporate versions. It's referring to the normal Black's Law Dictionary definition, right? So what I typically do is go on this little, we're going to go to my Nation of the Amnesty Coalition page, and we're going to go to my Covenant of an Ambassador. This is where I have a bunch of definitions that are all involving this, right? So if you look up the definition of state in its lowercase sense, in its largest sense, a state is a body politic or a society of men. So we go to body politic, state or nation or public associations. Not very good. We go to society, an association or company of persons, generally unincorporated, united together by mutual consent in order to deliberate, determine, and act jointly for some common purpose. In a wider sense, the community or public, the people in general. That's a better definition. Okay. But this is the one that really blew the whole thing out for me, the definition of the word nation, right? And this definition can be used for all of the words we've already gone over. The word state, the word society, the word body politic. All these terms mean the same thing. And this particular term of nation, this is where things start to get really, really interesting. And the word state and the word nation and the word body politic start to actually take shape and make sense. Definition of nation. An independent body politic, a society of men united together for the purpose of promoting their mutual safety and advantage by the joint efforts of their combined strength. But every combination of men who govern themselves independently of all others will not be considered a nation. A body of pirates, for example, who govern themselves are not a nation. To constitute a nation, another ingredient is required. The body thus formed must respect other nations in general and each of their members in particular. Such a society has her affairs and her interests. She deliberates and takes resolutions in common, thus becoming a moral person who possesses an understanding and will peculiar to herself and is susceptible of obligations and rights. And to take that into a very simple form and simplify that definition, it's the same way that all the cells form the human body for you. It's billions of these little tiny living organisms that form into one organism that operates as a cohesive whole. And if you do good things, typically, not always, if you do good things in life and you're nice to people, you get to live. If you're a complete asshole and you're rude and you're mean, you screw people over, depending on where you're at in life, typically you don't live. And the definition of the word nation hinges off of the fact that if you have good internal tranquility and you spread and help others, essentially. So if you're not spreading and helping others and you're damaging other people and you're a terrorist cell or something like that, you wouldn't have the protections of being considered the word nation, and you wouldn't legally be classified as a nation. And that's what they're saying here, right? Now, if you'll notice, location and territory has absolutely nothing to do with the definition of the word nation. And I can even further prove that, because that's usually pretty shocking to people. If you go to what I was showing you before the show started, I'll just show you where this comes from. But this is what we need to show you to really totally prove what I just said. I'm going to prove it 100% right here. So on the DS-11 passport application form on the upper right, in the section where what you're supposed to fill out, nobody ever notices that you have these little boxes, and then you have these two little lines, and you have these two little sections, right? So if you go to 22 CFR 51.3, you have types of passports. There's 4 different types of passports: a regular passport, a service passport, an official passport, and a diplomatic passport. What they're asking you on the DS-11 form is, what of the 4 types of passports would you like? A no-fee regular, which means regular, a service passport, an official passport, or a diplomatic passport. Okay, that comes from here, and you're also going to see it here. And then the END dot space pound space line, they're asking you, what endorsement codes would you like? Those endorsement codes are found in Title 8 of the Foreign Affairs Manual, Section 505.2. And you scroll down, and it says list of current endorsements, and then it has the 4 different types. There's a couple weird subtypes, but the four main types of passport, and then you have all the different endorsement codes, and it tells you, like, the D stands for diplomat. So this first one and second one and third one and fourth one, these would only apply to diplomatic passports. But as you go down, you'll start to see other ones, D's, R's, all. So all means that this particular code applies to all the types of passports. N means, I believe, no fee regular, and then O means official. Let's see. N, no fee regular, O is official. So N comma O would mean those two. DNO means this one applies to, could apply to all 3 different types, diplomat, no fee regular, or official. If we go to endorsement code number 11, which means the bearer is an ambassador at large for title, people typically think, oh yeah, an ambassador at large for South Korea, some locatable place. But look at the example they give you here. E.g., ambassador at large for global women's issues. Global Women's Issues is a nation. The United Nations is a nation. Has nothing to do with country names. South Korea, North Korea, New Zealand, Texas, has absolutely nothing to do with that. You could plug in a Lions Club of Pennsylvania. You could type in International Lions Club. You could type in a Freemason Society of Southern California. Global Black Lives Matter. You could do anything you want. Those are all nations, as long as they're, operating with some idea of decorum and they're doing more good than bad. Essentially, they could legally classify themselves as a nation.
Wow.
So nation and state mean the same thing. And you're involved in all sorts of nations in your life. Your family is a nation if you have decent familial relationships inside and outside of your family. Your job is a nation legally. Anything you might be doing online could be considered a nation. Your online groups could be considered a nation depending on their activities. So you have all sorts of nations that you're involved in. And what's funny is the only one that you ever put on any documentation is United States. What's funny is that's the only nation you aren't a part of. You're a part of all these different nations, and the only one you ever put on any of your documentation is the one nation you're not a part of. Because the thing is that you don't even know where it is. I don't even know where it is.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to ask yourself, how do you get there? This is how you get there. There's only one way to get to United States. You can't locate it. You can't physically get there. It's physically impossible. So how do you get there? Naturalization. There's no other way to get there. The term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a nation upon an individual or organization after birth by any means whatsoever. Your birth certificate is a naturalization certificate. It doesn't say conferring of nationality of a state upon yourself. It doesn't say conferring of nationality of a state upon a business of which you are more than 75% owner of. It doesn't say means the conferring of nationality of a state upon a trust of which you are the trustee. You can confer nationality of a state upon anyone or anything or any corporation or any group or any estate or any association or any partnership or any unincorporated group or anything, because that doesn't, the definition of the word organization isn't even completed by the definition in subsection 828, and it doesn't even fully define it, and it could mean a whole bunch of other shit that's not even there. I don't even know. There's literally no end to it. So if you were to reread this definition, and if you want it to make perfect sense to you, the term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of literally any group or anything or any entity or any idea that's at peace internally and externally upon literally anything or anyone anywhere after birth by any means whatsoever. And that is the definition of naturalization. So if you get pulled over and the officer asks you anything, you could say you're a resident of Antarctica. In that moment, you didn't lie to the officer. In that moment, you naturalized. You conferred the nationality of Antarctica upon a person, which happens to be you, after birth by any means whatsoever. You could naturalize everyone and everything every second of the day. I could travel through the whole world legally in the next 15 minutes live on this show. I can go to every country on the planet and a bunch of other countries that don't even exist physically. because the idea of nation could be anything, any idea. You can make it up, whatever, and then whatever the purpose or whatever the mission statement of that nation is, like global women's issues. So if we were to look up global women's issues, they have their own section at the Department of State, it looks like. Interesting. Global women's issues. So global women's issues is part of the Department of State. And global women's issues, I don't know what the purpose of it is. Women, peace, and security. Whatever global women's issues is, whatever they stand for, that's the nation. All right. So if we go back to the term naturalization, so it literally means anyone can confer nationality of a nation upon literally anyone or anything or any group, whether or not the group is incorporated or not. It makes no difference. After birth, by literally any means, literally anything. So conferring of anything upon anything by anything. That's the definition of the term naturalization. Okay. That's why I told you you're going to experience more freedom from this one word than anything else you've ever done in your entire life times 150,000. You've always wanted to live in Puerto Rico. You've always wanted to live in Brazil. You've always wanted to, congratulations. You say it and it becomes a reality in the legal world instantly. You can live anywhere you want right now by simply saying it, and boom, you're there. Now, if you want to experience Brazil, you would need to physically go there. But if you'd like to live there on paper, the easiest thing in the world. I would confer the nationality of Brazil upon myself and my trusts or any other organizations after birth. Now, birth also includes the birthday of the person called the trust. The trust is a person. The corporation is a person. The day that it was incorporated is the birthday of the person called Starbucks Incorporated. So as long as that person has been born, for example, in a non-statutory trust, the day that the trust was born would be the day that the grantor or settler or executor, which all means the same thing, it's the person who's bringing the trust into existence, the day that they signed the trust documents, but there'd have to be either a notary that notarized the document when it was signed, or there would need to be two witnesses that both sign, stating that they know the identity of the individual and they physically watched that identified individual sign the documents. Once that executor or settler or grantor does one of those two things, two witnesses or a notary, then that is the birthday of the person called the trust. And then the trustee would sign it after that point. So if the trustee doesn't sign it till 4 or 5 days later, the birthday of the person, the trust, would still be the original day, 5 days previously, when the grantor signed to bring that trust into existence. And that'd be the birthday or birth of the trust. So there has to be a birth first, and then after the birth, there is naturalization. And you can naturalize, you can go all through Brazil, all through South America right now from the comfort of your own home in 20 minutes. And when you're on the side of the road with a police officer, anything you tell him instantaneously becomes truth in law. You are naturalizing yourself. You can say anything you want. I'm a resident of France. I'm actually a resident of New Zealand. I actually live in a cave in China, up in the hills. I'm a resident of China. And once those words come out of your mouth, you just naturalized.
Boom.
So they sue you and they say, that's not true, blah, 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 blah. What do you mean it's not true? I just naturalized. Nothing you can do about it. Not a goddamn thing you can do about it. You are literally vapor when you understand the definition of naturalization. It is physically impossible to tie me into the California Vehicle Code or the tax code or anything else, because you can't pin me down for more than a split second. Even if you ripped out all my teeth and my tongue and stapled my mouth shut, by any means whatsoever, I can write it on a piece of paper and it's still naturalization.
Brandon, have you seen anybody use this definition to their advantage? Because what you're saying in a court of law, in some of the examples you're giving with police officers or anything where it's benefited them. I don't know if there's any examples that maybe you've even had to experience yourself, where I know you with your law firm, Williams & Williams, you are bringing cases regularly. And so I'm curious.
Well, my cases are all negotiable instrument financial cases, but I'll probably sue the Department of State at some point just to have some fun and just to sort all this out, because they obviously have some serious misunderstandings. So if you go to the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 15, everyone has the right to a nationality. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality, nor denied the right to change his nationality. When you start getting into residency laws on the state level, for example, in California, there is no physical inhabitancy about residency. Just because you're physically inhabitant California does not mean you're physically inhabiting state of California. So the thing is that the way that they determine residency in most states, in California for sure, but in most states, is through driver's license, voter registration, and paying state tax. You think you're a resident, so you need to pay state tax. No, paying state tax makes you a resident. It's the opposite. If you don't have a driver's license and you don't have voter registration and you don't pay state tax, you aren't a resident. They cannot force you to be a resident. That would violate the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is all about slavery and indentured servitude, right? 13th Amendment. And there's also a bunch of codes in Title 18 abolished slavery in the United States. And you have things like 18 USC indentured servitude. That's 18 USC 1584. You have 18 USC forced labor. 18 USC 1589. You have 18 USC peonage, which is actually found in Title 42 as well, but it's 18 USC 1581. You also have, there's one I'm missing. I think enticement into slavery, 18 USC 1583. And then you also have, I believe, 18 USC 1583A, 1584A. Yeah. And then you have 1593A, benefiting financially from peonage, slavery, and trafficking, right? So if they try to force you to say that you're a resident of state of California and they don't have any contractual basis of you volunteering, then they're violating all of these Title 18 sections, and they're also violating Article 15 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And it's actually an international human rights violation. And that's why you won't find physical location as part of residency. Residency is contract only. You can only be a resident through contracts.
Gotcha. So that's how they sneakily get you into agreeing to the contract. And therefore, that is why we're paying taxes, et cetera, et cetera. That's like one of the examples. I don't know exactly the tempo of the presentation, so I don't want to mess up the flow, but does this now kind of segue into taxes? Because that's a big thing I think people would want to talk about. And I'm sure everyone's wondering, like, Brandon, so you mean to tell me you don't pay taxes?
Well, there's two. There's don't pay taxes. With that terminology, that sentence assumes that I have a tax liability. So when you start understanding the tax code, the correct way you'd respond to that is, I don't have a tax liability. I never got the bill in the first place. That's the actual situation. So when you say you don't pay taxes, that's a tricky sentence, because you're basically saying, so you mean to tell me that the tax liability of which you do have, you aren't paying? You see, that's not my situation. My situation is I never get any of the bills. So no, I don't pay them because I don't get them. Would you pay a bill you don't get?
Of course not.
There you go. So that's the actual answer to the question. And I'll explain how that works.
Yeah, and I believe also in tax law, isn't the word persons used there too? Or isn't that where they say you have to, only a person who, like, I forget how it's phrased, could pay taxes. But if you're not one of those, if you're not per that definition, you actually you could not pay taxes. And by the way, I don't want to disrupt the flow of this, but I was just thinking of that as you were speaking about everything with everything we just covered with naturalization.
Yeah. So Title 26 is the tax code. 7701 is where all the definitions are. And that's where this definition of person at the beginning of the presentation, this is actually my favorite definition, because there's some really complicated definitions of person, and there's also some oversimplified versions. Like the Title 8 one is super ultra. It's almost literally anything, anywhere, always. The one from the tax code is, I like it because it's a little bit in the middle. It's not, you'll see some like in Title 49 that just go on and on and on, the word person. The Title 49 definition of the word person, it even says includes railroads. So it just goes on and on and on about all this craziness, right? This one is right in the middle. So it gives us some stuff, but it doesn't go on and on and on and on and on forever. And it's not super crazy and confusing, right? So the term person shall be construed to mean and include an individual, a trust, estate, partnership, association, company, or corporation, right? So this is the part where we get into the national, right? So in all of law, this teeny little section right here, 21, 22, and 23 is in my opinion, the most powerful little tiny section by far of anything I've ever found anywhere. And this is Title 8, Section 1101, subsection A21, A22, A23, right? So this is where we start getting into the whole idea of national or state national, right? And even the people in the state national movement don't really understand what that means, because state national is sort of in itself like saying the same word twice, kind of, right? So the term national, and if you notice, it's not capitalized. It's also not capitalized anywhere. It's not capitalized on the DS-11 form. It's not capitalized in the passport, of which I literally have in my hand right here. It's not capitalized anywhere. The term national is not a proper noun, which I do find fascinating. For whatever reason, in 8FAM 505.2, if you look at endorsement code number 11, which is the one where they talk about a national but not a citizen, whoever wrote this is an idiot, because the term national here and the term national here is capitalized. That's incorrect. And you'll see that as we go through Title 8. The term national, I've never seen it capitalized. It's not a capitalized word, okay? So even within my own material, I often capitalize it, which is incorrect, actually, in a very, very purest sense. I capitalize it just so you can see it better, but really it's not a capitalized word, right? So the term national means a person, and we're still in Title 8, so it's that same definition, an individual or an organization, owing permanent allegiance to a state or nation. Now, this word permanent slips people up a lot, so let's click on that one. It's got a special definition. Surprise, surprise. The term permanent means a relationship of continuing or lasting nature as distinguished from temporary, but a relationship may be permanent even though it is one that may be dissolved eventually at the instance either of the United States or of the individual in accordance with law. So this word doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless. It means that it's temporary, it's permanent rather than temporary, but any party pretty much can just kill it anyways. So that's not really permanent. It literally means nothing. It's just there to like throw you off or whatever. So if we reread this, we can just remove that and we replace the word person with the definition. We replace state with the word nation. Now it starts to make sense. It's very simple. The term national means an individual or an organization owing allegiance to a nation. That's it. Now, the question I always ask the audience is, do you need to live in a particular location to pledge allegiance to something that may or may not be located in a different location? You there?
Yeah.
Do you know the answer to that?
No. I mean, based on everything I mean, my brain is spinning right now, but based on everything you're saying, I'm like, the United States doesn't even have a location. So why would I pledge allegiance to anything? I feel like I'm good.
So can you pledge allegiance to France without being in France?
Yeah.
Good. So the term national has nothing to do with physical location. It has to do with pledging allegiance, or if you want to get really crazy with the terminology, owing allegiance. So if you owe allegiance to global women's issues, you are a national of the nation called Global Women's Issues. If you owe allegiance to my nation, which is the nation of the Amnesty Coalition, if you would like to pledge allegiance to the nation of the Amnesty Coalition, you become a national of the nation of the Amnesty Coalition. We don't have citizens in the nation of the Amnesty Coalition because the word citizen means governmental employee. We only have nationals. You can't be a citizen of my nation. It's impossible. It's physically impossible. You can only be a national. And that goes back to what I was showing you at the beginning. 8 U.S.C. 1401 and 8 U.S.C. 1408 shows to you, again, that we're talking about two entirely different subjects. 1401, the following shall be nationals and citizens of the United States at birth. 1408, the following shall be nationals but not citizens of the United States at birth. So this proves to us without a shadow of a doubt, that these are two completely different subjects. Nationality and citizenship are two completely different subjects. And as we look at Title 8 is talking mostly about nationality, not citizenship, right? So now we start getting back into the definition of the word national. The term national means a person owing allegiance to a nation or a state. Now, if an individual or an organization would like to pledge allegiance to the state called United States, that individual or organization becomes a national of the United States, which is found here, 8 U.S.C. 1101 subsection A22. The term national of the United States means A, a citizen of the United States, which would be an employee of the government, or B, a person who, though not a citizen of the United States, owes permanent allegiance to the United States. And if you look at 22 CFR 51.2, you'll see here passports are issued to nationals only. A passport may be issued only to a U.S. national. That's why when you go onto the DS-11 form and you look right above where you sign the documentation in front of the passport application person, it says right here, I declare under penalty of perjury all of the following. 1, I am a citizen or non-citizen national of the United States. What are they asking you? They're saying a passport may be issued only to a U.S. national, and a U.S. national is only a citizen of the United States or a person who, though not a citizen of the United States, owes permanent allegiance to the United States. So what they're saying when you sign this is they're saying that you are attesting to the fact that you are either A or B here. And then you go on the I-9 form when you're going to get an employment authorization, employment eligibility verification. Box 1, a citizen of the United States. Box 2, a non-citizen national of the United States. Nationality and citizenship are two entirely different subjects.
Yeah. Wow.
It tells you can only check one. This is also false. This is false. You could technically check both. They don't let you, but that's because literally even our own government does not know how this works.
Right.
You can be both. It tells you right in 1401. The following shall be nationals and citizens.
But there'd be no advantage to be a citizen. It'd be a complete waste.
No, so what the state national movement, quote unquote, is really doing when you boil it down to the actual terminology and you get really, really crazy about all the words, is we're eliminating citizenship and retaining nationality through a qualified pledge of allegiance. You say to yourself, I don't want to pledge allegiance to this thing that's located in the District of Columbia. Well, if you go to my website and you go to resources and documents and you go down to the explanatory statement, which is what gets attached to the DS-11 passport application form. If you go on to the DS-11, it says here, we'll reread this. 1, I am a citizen or non-citizen national of the United States and have not performed any of the acts listed under acts or conditions on page 4 of the instructions of this application. And then here's the key point, unless explanatory statement is attached. So you can attach an explanatory statement that explains various aspects of the DS-11 form. And I have one here that you can download for free. And if you go down to the allegiance section, we have the definition of allegiance. By allegiance is meant the obligation of fidelity and obedience which the individual owes to the government under which he lives or to his sovereign in return for the protection he receives. It may be an absolute and permanent obligation, or it may be a qualified and temporary one. So I said, okay, why don't I create a qualified and temporary obligation, Pledge of Allegiance, right? So this is my qualified and temporary Pledge of Allegiance. And it's typically the one that even people that are very skeptical of the government are okay with signing because they want a passport. To be clear, I am not an enemy of the incorporated entity that calls itself United States, but since I do not live in that area, nor do I have much in the way of contractual obligations with that area, my allegiance lies simply in the ideas that are found within that incorporated body that would match up with the definitions of nation and peace from the definitions section in section 2. So we'll get into peace in just a moment. My allegiance is not infinite and unconditional. My allegiance is confined to be within the definitions of nation and peace. And if the federal corporation decides at any point to step outside of those definitions, then my allegiance would end at that point. By definition, if the federal corporation ever steps outside the definition of nation or peace, then by its own codes, it ceases to exist. My allegiance ends at the moment that the nation ceases to exist simply because my support cannot exist for a nation that does not physically exist. My true and unfettered allegiance lies in the ideas and the spirit behind the idea of being a true American: freedom, common law, masculine and feminine duality, supreme force, technical performance, national pride, etc. My love and devotion to the heart and soul of our collection of independent, unincorporated states is unquestionable and barely conditional. My allegiance ultimately lies in the unincorporated state in which I domicile, but that love does truly extend to all other unincorporated states found within our union that intend and factually produce tranquility inside and outside of their nation and carry themselves as a unified body that operates with morals and decorum. Just like the oath of office of the Senate, quote, I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, end quote. But that specific Constitution is only and exclusively the original one that belongs to the unincorporated United States. The incorporated United States is foreign to me, and the unincorporated United States is domestic to me, right? And in order to fully understand that, you would have to go to the definition of the term peace, which is what I was talking about there. So the definition of the term peace comes from this other section that I found, which is the definition of a foreign government, right? So you'll see in the media things like the Nation of the Amnesty Coalition or 𝘰𝘮𝘕𝘓, of which I'm an ambassador for, and these other nations that are popping up all over the country. They are not recognized by the United States. That's what the media is using to combat what is going on right now. If you go and clear up the definition of the term foreign government straight out of the United States Code, 18 U.S.C. 11, the term foreign government includes any government, faction, or body of insurgents within a country with which the United States is at peace. This is the most important and shocking part, irrespective of recognition by the United States. So people believe that in order to have a foreign government or your own nation, you have to be recognized by the United States. The United States themselves is telling you that recognition is not a part of having your own foreign government. You simply have to be at peace. Even if they don't know you're there, you're still legally classified as a foreign government. You don't even need to let them know you're there. So the thing is that what is the definition of the word peace? That appears to be the crux or the spinal cord that everything rests on. And that's true, it is. So what is the definition of the word peace? It goes beautifully with the definition of the word nation that we saw earlier, and it goes to show that these words are all married together. Peace is defined as the tranquility enjoyed by a political society internally by the good order which reigns among its members, and externally by the good understanding it has with all other nations. Applied to the internal regulations of a nation, peace imports, which means like shows or indicates. Peace imports, in a technical sense, not merely a state of repose and security as opposed to one of violence or warfare, but likewise a state of public order and decorum. And that's why I put in my explanatory statement, and carry themselves as a unified body that operates with morals and decorum. It's almost the same.
You attach this explanatory statement to your passport and your DS-11 form, which is to request for a passport it's your passport application, and then you're granted a passport as a non-citizen national, correct? For people that are watching.
So it's a little bit confusing because we have the state citizen, we have the U.S. citizen, and then we have the non-citizen national. So we have a few different terms. And in terms of what you actually get and how it actually works, we're not 100% sure. There's a lot of information about 3, 4, 5 stars on your passport card. I'm not so sure about that anymore after having looked at it for two and a half years, something like that now. But yes, there's this thing called a state citizen. There's this thing called a U.S. citizen. There's this thing called a non-citizen national. And you have the 14th Amendment, but the 14th Amendment was never really passed as per Congress. There's a lot of confusion here, but yes, the whole point is, for example, some of the key aspects of what you're going to fill out is you're going to fill out this upper right part, pick out what kind of passport you want. For example, most people click NFR, which stands for no fee regular, and then they write 09 in the endorsement code. 09 is right here. The bearer is a United States national and not a United States citizen.
Yeah, it's interesting, Brandon, because when I recently filled out mine, I don't remember filling out that last form. And when I signed, I believe I signed without the United States when I did my signature. But I kind of told you offline, I ran into some issues. The United States Passport Office was like not going to do it. They weren't going to grant me this passport. They said it was altered. Ran into other issues. I told you that they sent me back a letter saying, "Oh no, Mister, you are a 14th Amendment citizen," which I thought was very hilarious. But yeah, I ran into some issues there. But so I'm just to give people the high level or the bird's eye view here. The reason you're doing this too, the reason you would be reclaiming your status as a non-citizen national is to change your status, because right now you are deemed a citizen per the United States Corp. And because of that, because you are in contract and you are operating in this entity, in this form daily, you are therefore subject to all the laws, that a police officer, you get pulled over, you're subject to all the laws and taxes and all those other kind of things. So
there's two, so to keep it pretty simple, it's still pretty complicated, but to simplify it as much as possible, there's two different Californias. There's the unincorporated and there's the incorporated. Unincorporated has a constitution from 1949. Incorporated has a constitution from 1879. So what happens is that the incorporated version of state of California is located in the District of Columbia.
Yep.
So if you're naturalized, which you choose which one you want, it's all literally just up to you. It's totally optional. It's completely voluntary. All of this information is you move wherever you say you are. Boom, instantly. So if you want to move from District of Columbia back to California, boom, it's that easy. You can do it in 5 seconds, right? So if you live in the unincorporated California, you actually live in a foreign country from United States, but you are pledging allegiance from a foreign country to United States.
Right.
And that's how you become a non-citizen national of the United States.
Yeah.
I'm a non-citizen national of the Nation of the Amnesty Coalition. I'm a non-citizen national of 𝘕𝘕𝘓𝑗amistan, and I'm a non-citizen national of the United States. I don't live in the United States. I live in a foreign country called California, unincorporated, and I have pledged qualified allegiance, which is what you saw, to the United States, which makes me a national of the United States. Specifically, that subsection B, a person who, though not a citizen of the United States, owes permanent allegiance to the United States. And that's what allows me to have a passport.
Yeah.
So I actually don't live in the United States. I'm not a resident of state of California, and I'm not a resident or citizen of United States. I'm a foreigner that has pledged allegiance.
I love that. Thank you for breaking that down. And that makes perfect sense to me. I'm just for people that are trying to understand, like, well, how can someone not pay taxes and stuff?
I'll show you that. That's super easy now that we've gone through all this.
This would be one of the first steps. If you are, and I know what you're saying, like, yeah, you can just naturalize yourself, but you do have to correct your status, which you talk about in your contract killer course, how to do that. This is one of the steps, though, to doing that is becoming a non-citizen national and reclaiming your status or pledging allegiance, kind of the way what you just said.
Yeah, clarifying all of this. All you got to do is just say everything. Say everything and clean it all up with words or written words or whatever, and then boom, it's done, right? The conferring of nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever is the definition of naturalization. Okay, so now we've figured all that out, and we figured out that it's the easiest thing in the world to move yourself around, and it's a joke, or to move around any of your legal fictions, or hell, even to move around other people or their legal fictions. Doesn't matter. If someone else doesn't realize the definition of naturalization, if you sue them and you say that their business is located in France and it's located in France, unless they fight against it and renaturalize it, I mean, you can move other people's stuff and you can move your children, and that's why the birth certificate is a naturalization document. The baby never said, well, wait a second, I'm not actually born in state of Nevada. So once the mom said it without anyone else contesting it, then that is naturalization, and you've been now naturalized into the business called state of Nevada, which is located in the District of Columbia. Yeah. So 26 CFR 1.871-1 is really all we need to learn about the tax code, and it makes things very simple, right? Now, very few people have ever noticed this. Every single term they use these two terms for income tax classification. For purposes of the income tax, alien individuals are divided generally into two classes, namely resident aliens and non-resident aliens. So alien means foreigner. So this gets even more confusing and hilarious because they're saying a foreigner who's basically, if you look up the definition of the word resident, it means somebody who lives temporarily in a location. So the word domicile means like your actual real home. The word resident or residence means a temporary home where someone intends to return to their domicile, and they're in that temporary location for some sort of like pleasure purposes or business purposes. That's the legal definition of the word resident, right? So resident alien means foreigner. So if you were to translate resident alien into English, The term resident alien means an individual who is temporarily visiting us, who doesn't live here. He's a foreigner, and he's visiting us for some sort of business related purpose. That's what resident alien means. And then non-resident alien means a foreigner who's not here. That's literally all it means. And then again, how do you locate yourself anywhere? Through naturalization. So the only way you can be a resident alien is by saying you're there. And the only reason you can be a non-resident alien is by saying you're not there and saying you're somewhere else. It's literally that simple. I'm not kidding. It's a joke. It's literally a joke, right?
Yeah.
So it says here, resident alien individuals are, in general, taxable the same as citizens of the United States. So what they're saying here is individuals who are here temporarily, who are foreigners, who are here temporarily on some sort of business-related endeavor, are, in general, taxable the same as people who are employees of the government. So someone rolls into town, they work for Boeing, and they're there to do some dealings with the government, and they're in Washington, D.C., and they say they're in the United States, even though that's not even physically possible to even locate wherever that thing is. They would be considered a resident alien. Somebody who works for the government, who works for the Capitol building or the White House or one of the 15 departments of the government would be a citizen of the United States. So resident aliens or temporary visitors who are doing business here are taxable the same as employees of the government. Non-resident alien individuals, people who don't say they're here, is literally all it is. It's very simple. It's just naturalization. Are taxable only on certain income from sources within this unknown location that's located somewhere in the District of Columbia, and on the income described in section blah, blah, blah. If you start digging down this, it doesn't go anywhere. It's very confusing. It's almost like they just made this part just to kind of smoke screen, because you don't see a lot of that, but this one's definitely doesn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. So we just skip over that. This is what everyone is doing. And it's almost the same thing as naturalization. You'll see this. This is basically naturalization in action and goes to further prove the power of naturalization. However, non-resident alien individuals may elect to be treated as U.S. residents for the purpose of determining their income tax liability. Now, what does that mean in Title VIII? Naturalization. If you say you're a resident of the United States, you just elected to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purposes of determining your income tax liability. So when somebody says, do you pay taxes? The long story to that is no, I have never elected to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purpose of determining my income tax liability. That would be like the ultra legal way that you would respond to a question like that. I don't do that because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But that would be the ultra specific legal terminology you would use to respond to something like that. Or if you want to be the very, very simple version of that is, no, I never volunteered.
Yeah. So I'm sure people that are listening though are like, okay, so you're telling me tax time comes around April 15th, tax time is due. What do you do? Just
well, you get elected. You're a non-resident alien individual. You're a foreigner. Everyone is. You can't not be an alien. Yep. I suppose the only term that they don't use alien would be citizen, which means employee. So I guess an employee is not an alien, but everybody else is, right? So you're an alien any way you look at it, unless you work there. So a non-resident alien individual, somebody who is a foreigner who doesn't live here or who isn't visiting here temporarily for business purposes, never elected, right? So when you filled out a W-9 tax form, this is pretty much how everyone elects. This is basically where election takes place. You get your first job, Taco Bell, McDonald's, car wash. For me, it was Taco Bell, McDonald's, and car wash. 16, 17, 18 years old. They hand you one of these bad boys. Section 2, under penalties of perjury, I certify that I am a U.S. citizen or other U.S. person. Signature of U.S. person. What did you just do? You just naturalized. Per Title 8. What else did you just do? Per Title 26, you elected to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purposes of determining your income tax liability. A U.S. citizen is somebody who works for the government. A U.S. person is a resident alien.
Boom.
Now you ask yourself, well, Brandon, everyone signs a W-9. How in the hell do you get away with not signing a W-9?
Exactly.
Well, if you're not naturalized or electing to be located in this unlocatable place inside the District of Columbia called the United States, you would fill out a W-8BEN form. W-8BEN form is for foreigners. Foreign beneficial owner. If you are a U.S. citizen or other U.S. person, including a resident alien individual, you would do a W-9. You're not doing a W-9. And what's funny is it's kind of a weird conversation if you think about it. But if you look at 18 U.S.C. 911, this is the one I always use because this just freaks people out. It's always good. 18 U.S.C. 911, whoever falsely and willfully represents himself to be a citizen of the United States shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years. This is the one I use with cops and government employees. They say, you're a citizen of the United States. I say, you shut your fucking mouth. You think I'm going to fucking prison? And I remember when I went to the Social Security Administration, she said, you're a U.S. citizen. And I got fucking pissed. And I pulled up 18 U.S.C. 901. I pressed it up against the window. I said, I'm not going to fucking prison. You're the one going to fucking prison. Don't you ever say that again. And she was like totally freaked out. And then she processed my documents. You see? Don't you ever fucking call me that. I'm not going to fucking prison. You're going to fucking prison, bitch. Not me.
By the way, why were we
freaks people out? It's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
It's very
I'm totally
effective.
Use that. Why were you at the Social Security office? What was the intention there? Is there anything?
Trying to swap my Social Security account from U.S. citizen to what's called other, which is typically used for refugees and asylees. They don't have non-citizen national at the Social Security Administration because when you start digging down that rabbit hole deep, the Social Security Administration and the Social Security number is attached to a business that looks like your name. So Title 8 doesn't even necessarily apply to the Social Security Administration.
Wow. I remember going on the U.S. Treasury. There's some USTreasury.gov website, and I typed in my name and social, and it's like a bond. It actually said my name was worth $32,000. And it was just blew my mind. I was like,
probably a lot more than 32,000, probably like 320 million, but yes.
Yeah.
But anyways, so back to the taxes thing. How does taxes work? Taxes is very simple. You were a non-resident alien individual. Then around 16, 17, 18 years old, you fill out a W-9. And you elected to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purposes of determining your income tax liability. And you've been doing that over and over and over and over again for your entire life. So you have a 1040. This is what self-employed individuals are filling out, right? And then you have the 1040NR, non-resident alien individual. It's a totally different form. They look very similar. They look almost exactly the same. On a 1040, you would write all your income. On a 1040NR, you would write zero. How much did I spend? How much did I make? How much did I this? Zero, 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 all the way down the whole page. Non-resident alien individual does not have an income tax liability. So how do you become a non-resident alien individual if you've elected to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purposes of determining your income tax liability? Very easy. I have a free document on my documents and resources page. You're going to scroll down to revocation of election to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purposes of determining your income tax liability. This is an affidavit. You're going to scroll down. Affidavit, revocation of election to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purposes of determining income tax liability. I use all the exact same terminology they use. That way there's no confusion. And then there's a little bit of there's some additional stuff that has to get done here. It's additional protections, right? And you have definitions. We go through some definitions, nation, peace, all the good stuff. A lot of the stuff I just talked about. Opening statements. I'd like to clarify that I'm entirely at peace with the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, 𝘰𝘯𝘵𝘢𝑗, which is often what comes up on your caller ID when they call you, which is hilarious because they actually aren't a government agency at all. And if you go online and type in to fucking Google, let's see what it'll do these days. Is the Internal Revenue Service a government agency? It's an agency of the United States. So it's like having power of attorney. It operates on behalf of, but it isn't actually legally a part of the U.S. government. And that's why it's located in Puerto Rico. The headquarters is in Puerto Rico, not the District of Columbia. Anyways, it's an interesting rabbit hole.
Yeah, really quick on that note, I was watching a video that was sent to me recently, and it said something like the IRS was formed in whatever it was, March 16th of 1954, and then it was dissolved the following day, like March 17th, and it's written in their like code. You can actually look it up.
Probably. There's so much goofy shit. Really, the simplicity of the IRS is very, very simple. The IRS is a private corporation that is headquartered in Puerto Rico, and it's a debt collection company. You can actually process documents in a certain way to get the IRS to collect debts for you, by the way. And the number one client of the Internal Revenue Service is the United States Treasury. And if you wanted to go on there and start filing documents, you can actually give the Internal Revenue Service a certain percentage, and you can actually hire the Internal Revenue Service as a debt collection agency for yourself if you wanted to, right? That's besides the point. It's a debt collection company. They operate under all the same debt collection stuff, and you can hit them with all the same debt collection stuff that you'd hit any other debt collector with. Anyone in the debt collection space, they can use all the same techniques on the IRS, and it functions just fine. You may have to beat it home a little bit in the course. They may pretend to be dumb, but if you beat it home, it's all the same shit. They're a debt collection company, and that's it. That's all it is, right?
Gotcha.
So that's why I say 𝘰𝘯𝘵𝘢𝘵, and I laugh because they're not a part of the government at all. They're an agency of the government. I could be an agency of the government if I was doing some kind of contract work on behalf of the government and we signed a power of attorney together, then I would be an agency of the U.S. government. And I would call it, that's how you get like the service passports and the official passports, the S and the O on the 4 types of passports. If you look on there, it'll say contractor and all. Anyways, so for most of my life, I have not understood taxation and the basic ideas of nationality, location, etc. Because of this, I have taken time to truly dive deep and understand how all this works in great detail. I have no animosity, desire for revenge, or any other feelings associated with my relationship with internal revenue. And I now feel like I can properly perform on all 𝘰𝘯𝘕, which means creature of the law. It's in relationship to a living man or a woman. So 𝘰𝘯𝘕 involves everything under the sun, moon, and stars that isn't a man or a woman. / public corporation. Definition of public corporation is a corporation that is I have it here. Let's see. 𝘰𝘯𝘕, a creature of the law, an artificial being as contrasted with a natural person, applied to corporations, considering as deriving their existence entirely from the law. A public corporation is one created by the state for political purposes and to act as an agency in the administration of civil government. Okay, and those definitions are also up above in the definition section. And then here we have nationality clarification, and here we have a USC 1101 subsection A23 states, the term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever. Through the tremendous power of naturalization, I hereby confer the nationality of the state called the Nation of the Amnesty Coalition on my 𝘰𝘯𝘕, Brandon Joe Williams. We go into a tax treaty. Tax treaty is real simple. There's no taxes. That's the whole tax treaty. And this clarifies any aspect of the 𝘤𝘵𝘏𝑒n. On the 𝘤𝘵𝘏𝑒n, they ask you for a tax treaty. So this is your tax treaty. I attest that my 𝘰𝘯𝘕 has been previously born after the Department of Health and Human Services processed my certificate of live birth. I have also been born as the agent on behalf of that all caps name as a non-incorporated living man, I was born on January 28th, 1986, and the 𝘰𝘪𝘳𝘊𝑗𝑒 was born on February 14th, 1986. If you look on your certificate of live birth, there's a section on there like date received by local health officer. It's 2 or 3 weeks after your birth. That's the birth of the 𝘰𝘪𝘳𝑗𝑒, the all caps name, business.
Gotcha.
So you have 2 birthdays, the birth of the 𝘰𝘪𝘳𝑗𝑒 and then the birth of you, right? And then it goes on, talking about 8 U.S.C. 1408, nationals but not citizens since their birth. So 1 or more points of that applies to me. We're non-resident aliens, and this is financial stuff. We're not going to get into that. And then closing statements, which is a very short section, by the way. The financial part is really, really short, but I'm not going to. It requires a lot of explanation to get into that, which I have a lot of videos on my YouTube that describes that. And then here's a really important point, right? So if you look at, so if you start sharing this information with your friends, they're going to send you tax positions, IRS. They're going to send you this page, not this one. Your friends are going to send you this one, the truth about frivolous tax argument, section 3. Now, I had a lot of trouble with this because when I first started getting into all this, I got sent this like 80 million times, right? And I was trying to figure out, okay, so how do I handle this one? This is a tough one, right? And then boom, I finally figured it out, right? The word taxpayer. Bah, bah, bah.
That's the
they
one.
Use it everywhere, everything, every letter you get, they're always going to say the word taxpayer. They don't even use any other term. They always use the word taxpayer. Even if you go all the way down to the bottom, you've got taxpayers' rights, taxpayer this, taxpayer advocate, taxpayer bill of rights. Everything is taxpayer. And that's when I had the big breakthrough, because then I started looking up, okay, what's the definition of taxpayer? And I found it, 26 U.S.C. 7701 subsection A14, definition of taxpayer. Drum roll, please.
Here we go.
Term taxpayer means any person subject to any internal revenue tax. A non-resident alien individual would not legally be a taxpayer. So once you revoke the election to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purposes of determining your income tax liability, the word taxpayer can no longer be used. You can actually sue the IRS for libel and slander. You can sue the IRS for violating the tax code by calling you taxpayer. They can't call you taxpayer anymore. You wouldn't legally be, even if I called myself a taxpayer, it'd be illegal.
Mm-hmm.
So after receipt of this revocation of election, neither myself nor the 𝘰𝘪𝘳𝑗𝑒 will be considered taxpayers any longer, as per the definition from 26 U.S.C. 7701 subsection A14. And I asked them to change that, and the new salutation is now foreign friend for all salutations. Wow. Again, we're at peace. If we aren't at peace, we aren't a foreign government. 18 U.S.C. 11.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So good, man. So good. I mean, I'm looking at the time. We jammed out we rocked the mic for 2 hours. I could go on. I mean, that's why your course is so good, because you just break all this down. Today, I really wanted to cover.
Well, a lot of this right here that we're going over in this course, as in this show, you're noticing, and not a lot of it, this was in the course, because this is evolved and clarified, and we've got better stuff and better definitions. So this whole show is like, 10 of the free course videos all together into one video, and it's a lot better, and it's a lot cleaner, and it's a lot, the course was more of like me fumbling around, and I wasn't totally sure, and I had a lot of good information, but we go into a lot of things that aren't in this show as well, and it's all good information. But we're now over 2 years since the course. It's been 2 years and 2 months since the course. So you're going to see in this show is all streamlined, and there's a lot of things that weren't in that original course, and the research just continues, and we're going to see if we can get this even more clarified. I think this is I don't know if we're going to be able to squeeze much more. It's like squeezing blood out of a turnip. I feel like this particular presentation has gone through so many variations and evolutions, but it's getting to a point now where I don't know what else could really change. But I guess 2 years ago, I also thought this was as good as it's going to get too. So I don't know. We'll see. I just don't even, there's no one I can even talk to or anything. I just, maybe I'll come across something tomorrow and then boom, something will shift. But usually it's small bits and pieces. You're not going to see this presentation go through some huge monumental shift. I don't think. I think naturalization, because naturalization isn't in the free course. When I found that was when everything changed. Everything changed. Naturalization broke open everything. It broke open the ability to start your own nation. It broke open everything just exploded open. Like all the doors just ripped right off the hinges when naturalization came into the picture.
Yeah. Yeah, really cool stuff. I wanted to cover obviously the history, which I think we covered, and just the whole taxation thing, because I think that's where a lot of people go, and then the actual status. There's so much more to cover. I'll have to bring you around for a round two. Maybe I'll fly out to LA. We'll do something in person. I don't know.
That'd be fun.
But because I would love to get into discharging debt and some of that. But those are more specific things. But
that's a whole nother presentation, and that's kind of like, just so everyone knows, everything I'm doing right now, everything I've gone over in the show is kind of like wrapped up in a bow, and it's kind of a lot of the shows I go on, I talk about this. But if you get more involved in like the day-to-day functionalities of what we're doing as a group, you'll see it's all involving financials. I mean, we are pretty much at this point in time, we have over the past year or so completely shifted away from all of this nationality and citizenship stuff. We use it all, and we use it all the time, and it's a tool, and it's cool. But in terms of like the day-to-day and the litigation and the bashing doors down and the paperwork and everything that we're talking about, you'll see we're at like 100% pretty much into financials right now, which is a whole nother subject. But the financial stuff is not a completed science. A lot of the stuff I've covered already in this show, a lot of it is kind of like a completed package deal, right?
Yeah.
The financials is still, it's like the hot thing right now. It's like all the beakers and everyone working in the lab coats. That's where we're at right now.
Well, and it's really cool because you're actually bringing cases to litigation. So you're actually you're breathing all of this knowledge into action. It's a lot different to read it and then go, oh yeah, in theory, this is what it means. But to actually test it and see, does it meet you're like one of the only people I know that's out there doing it, which is why I'm just like stoked for everything you're doing.
Yeah.
And just really just, I mean, I'm just rallying behind you, man. I'm like just cheering you on from the outside and happy to support any way I can. Seriously. And because I just appreciate it. Not many people will take the knowledge that you've taken and go, okay, well, let's test it. Let's see what this really means. And few will do that. That's courage right there. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you're putting it to action to see like, what does the law mean? What do they say that they say this, but how do the judges and how is everyone interpreting it? Because I don't think most judges, they don't know any of this stuff.
No.
Yeah. So that's why I always thought, man, that's a tough case to litigate when you're having to do a lot of explaining,
I pretty much just explain myself over and over and over, and that's all I've been doing for months and months and months, and we still haven't gotten any traction. I'm starting to wonder if they're not just playing dumb at this point. But I don't know any other option. So I'm still on there swinging. Only one of my cases has been thrown out, and it was the first one, and it was a sloppy case. So the other three are popping. The American Express case, which is the one I'm most known for, was dismissed, but we've already kind of picked it back up, and we're trying to breathe some life into it right now, and it might get picked back up again. If it does, we're going to go into discovery and all sorts of good stuff. So that one isn't really fully dead yet. And if they do fully kill it, which might happen in the next few weeks, it's very likely they will kill it. It's like a 50-50. Then we're going to go straight to appeals. So, there's a lot of things happening, a lot of action, a lot of filings into the docket. I have a lot of financial type stuff on my YouTube channel, which you can get to through my website, which is onestupidfuck.com. We never talked about that. It's pretty funny. Yeah. That's my kind of central hub to everything, right? And on my YouTube channel, you can sign up for my free course on my website. You can also, but there's a lot of things on my YouTube that aren't on my website, all my financial stuff. If you're looking for a deep dive into the financials, I recommend the first video on YouTube is going to be how to have infinite money in 10 minutes. That would be the first one I would watch, which is a 10-minute, super, super fast-paced, kind of silly, fun. It's almost like an advertisement. I literally pay to push it out as an advertisement. And then from there, there's a bunch of other shows. But if you want to skip straight to the craziness, I recently completed a video series called A Journey into UCC Article 3, which is a 6-part series breaking down all of the Uniform Commercial Code Article 3, all 6 parts of UCC 3. And it's basically everything under the sun, moon, and stars as to how currency actually functions in the society, what a Federal Reserve note is, what a promissory note is, what a bill is, and none of these things are anything like what you think it is. So it's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
UCC 3 and learning UCC 3 is the same on the financial end as learning naturalization on Title 8. You can create money out of thin air, and you can create as much of it as you want. And there's literally absolutely fucking nothing anyone can do about it. So it's extremely empowering.
So cool. So cool. If people want to learn more about what you're up to, tell me, like, where do you live at in terms, I know you mentioned YouTube. I know you're on Instagram as well, but social media. And if they just want to connect with you on your website, what's a good place to reach out to you?
I think onestupidfuck.com. It's got links to everything under the sun, moon, and stars pretty much, except maybe TikTok, which annoys the fuck out of me. Everything else is there, but I'm on TikTok, but I just don't like it very much.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Brandon Joe Williams, appreciate you, brother. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.